All right, my Renowned fam, welcome back to the Renowned Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Morris. I'm the founder and CEO of Renowned, and I am the host of this podcast. And I am so honored and I appreciate that you're joining me here today on this very special Memorial Day. Obviously, I know as a veteran, you never say Happy Memorial's Day like some people do, but I do hope you have a good day. And today, my guest, very special guest, her name is Phyllis Leavitt, and she's here to talk to us about something that you all know is a very important topic to me, which is mental health, right? And especially on this day, because a lot of veterans take their lives on Memorial Day and Veterans Day, and it's insane, and it's there are resources out there to help us. And so she's going to talk about that. She's going to talk about her book. She's got I think it's already out. She's going to be talking about her book, and then we're just going to be talking about mental health and her expertise in that area. So Phyllis, welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us to talk about these important topics, albeit hard topics to talk about. Go ahead and introduce yourself and give everybody your background.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here on your show today. And it's an honor and a pleasure for me to be here talking with you. And, like you, mental health is a really, really important topic for me. And just sort of as a way to introduce that, I went to therapy myself for the first time when I was in my 30s, and it was a really hard time in my life. And I had early childhood trauma that I was just starting to recall. And when I understood psychology, when I understood that our early conditioning or any kind of traumatic experience, no matter when it happens in your life, can have a profound effect on your emotional well-being, on your sense of yourself, on your beliefs, on your coping mechanisms, on the kinds of things that you're attracted to or not attracted to, the decisions and choices you make. It really, put a lot of puzzle pieces for me about myself in place that had felt, scattered and unreadable for me for a long time. And so, I'm very familiar with trauma on that level. I was not in the military, so that is not the trauma that I had, but I'm very familiar with the effects of trauma and what it takes, what it can take to really bring ourselves through that, to restore ourselves to our own well-being, to our essential wellness and goodness and wholeness. And it's a journey, and it takes courage and it takes strength, and it's a journey that I think is well worthwhile. So out of my career I became a therapist myself out of my own experience, and I've been a therapist for over 30 years, and I've worked with all kinds of pain and suffering that people have experienced. And it gave me a lens on what's going on in our country. And that's why I wrote my book. My book is called America in Therapy, A New Approach to Hope and Healing for a Nation in Crisis, and really looking at what's going on in our country through the lens of what I consider the best psychology, and looking toward our mental health and how we can bring ourselves back from the escalation of violence and divisiveness that we're experiencing, and the huge partisan divides and very slanderous and violent rhetoric that we're all exposed to, how we can pull ourselves back from that using the best principles of psychotherapy and healing ourselves as a nation as well as individuals. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. And I think we can go way, far afield with that.
Yeah, no. So first of all, I want to give you kudos because I've interviewed you're my second so what's the word, psychotherapist, I don't know,
Yeah.
that I've interviewed, and I have a very pointed view when it comes to therapy because I've had, anytime we have any sort of loss in the military during combat type stuff, we have to go talk to the shrinks and we have to do all this stuff. And I've talked to like a 24-year-old dude fresh out of college talking about, what it's like to take someone's life or whatever. And it's like, dude, like, what do you know? Like, you've barely even lived, like, let alone been in combat. And you're sitting here giving me advice. So that's really frustrating. And then I've had, experiences with people that do know what my experiences are like. And that is so important to me from a when I'm looking at a therapist. I'm like, whether or not I want to open up to this person, their history is what makes me that determining factor for me. This is a long-winded way to compliment you and say I respect the crap out of someone that's willing to say, you know what, this was my struggle, this was my pain, I had to deal with this, and now I'm going to go help people with this thing because I know what it's like. One of
Mhm.
my favorite analogies is, I'm not going to go to someone that's never used heroin to try to break my heroin addiction. I'm going to find someone that's been clean for 10 years and have them help me try to work through it because they know what the struggle is. They know what the life is like. They know what I'm going to go through. So I really respect that about you. And that's ultimately one of the main reasons I decided to have you on because obviously I want to talk about the mental health piece, but I also want to talk with someone that I know I respect. And that was a big deciding factor. So I really appreciate that about you. Um,
Well, I really
oh, go
appreciate
ahead.
hearing. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You go.
I just wanted to say really quickly that I think in our culture, it's still really hard to talk about having really deep pain and really being up against it and not necessarily knowing how to get out of it ourselves. I think we have a huge value on independence and I can do it myself. And if I'm strong and if I'm able, I should be able to like put the past behind me or whatever we tell ourselves. And having been through what I would really call a very dark night of the soul myself, I really appreciate the opportunity to say, I know that really deep pain. And I guess what I want to say is I used to feel so much shame about that. And I didn't want to talk about it. And so I really like just value the opportunity to just say it. Um, because our pain is not shameful and our sometimes our being at a loss of how to deal with the depth of trauma is normal. It's a normal human response to abnormal and very challenging and painful situations. So I just really appreciate your saying that because I don't often feel like I just have the opportunity to say, I think I get it. I wasn't in combat, so I don't share that, but I feel like I was fighting for my life on a different level.
Right. And no, yeah, absolutely. There are many different types of struggle out there. And it's just to me that's so important that I know that the person I'm sharing my deepest, darkest with understands what the deepest, darkest realm of the soul looks like.
Yeah.
But I love that you bring that up. That was actually going to be my first question. And man, when in the military, and this is something the military is working avidly to get rid of. I don't think they're necessarily going about it the right way, but the stigma of mental health being a weakness.
Right.
Um, and when you get locked in a room with a bunch of combat soldiers, we're alpha dudes, right? Like we're strong, we're fit, we're mentally stable, supposedly. I say that with air quotes if you're listening. But we're supposed to be all these things, and we do feel like it is a huge weakness when our minds start to unravel and break. How do how do we defeat that stigma? How do I get to a place? And I'm here now. Like I'm an open book. I will talk about my experience. I am not ashamed to cry about it. Like it is what it is. And it was painful and it was dark and it hurt. But there's so many of my brothers and sisters out there that are still trapped in this idea that if I step out of my shell, I'm showing weakness. How do we defeat this stigma?
Well, I think one way is to talk about it just the way you are, to say that there's nothing shameful about it. We are having normal responses to very traumatic experiences, very threatening experiences, very painful experiences. And it's normal to have a very deep and long lasting emotional response to that, if not physical response that can sometimes come up as well. So I think the more people that normalize that, the better. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is, I think, I've had so many people come to therapy for a variety of reasons, and it's generally pain in some area of their life that brings people to therapy in the first place, whatever it is. Because we don't generally seek help unless we really are up against it, right? But I've had so many people say to me, I don't want to be dependent on therapy. I don't want really to be dependent on you. I should be able to manage this myself, but here I am. And I always say the same thing. I always say, why not? We really need each other. We were not meant to be islands. No one is, we're born wired for love and connection. And it's our traumas that so often wall us off from even wanting to reach out for love and connection, either because we didn't have it and we're afraid we're not going to get it, or we're going to be rejected, or we don't want to appear needy, which is, such a shame, because the truth is we actually really need each other. And what heals for most of us is to find safe people to unburden ourselves with and reprocess what happened to us with. And so I just can't emphasize that enough, that, and what I would love to be a proponent of and see be, sort of like common knowledge in our social functioning, is that we could celebrate actually reaching out for help, that it's a sign of strength, that it takes courage to be that vulnerable, to cry your tears in front of another person, or even scream, which I've done. So I can tell you.
Yeah, and I'm gonna rephrase this, for my knuckle draggers out there, because I know they don't do, the whole touchy feely talk. Basically, what Phyllis is saying is, you know, and you are your own engine, right? And if you don't change the oil in your engine,
Mm.
your engine's gonna blow up. You need to go to, you got to go to the mechanic, which you got to go to that therapist. You got to get your oil checked. You got to get that service done so that your engine runs efficiently. And one of my favorite analogies is, if you don't take care of yourself, you're absolutely no good to others, right? We got to take care of us first. I know it seems selfish. I know, trust me, I've been there. It feels so selfish to focus on you first, especially when everyone around you needs help. But if you just give yourself constantly focusing on the mission, constantly focusing on the next thing, and never take time for yourself to process your experiences, whether it was military combat or whether you're an entrepreneur that's your business is failing, or you just got laid off from your job, whatever the case is, if you don't take the time for yourself to process these emotions, all you're doing is damaging yourself, ultimately making yourself less valuable, less useful to those around you.
And I really want to affirm that, because I think it's really true for so many people who don't feel like they can reach out or be vulnerable or talk about what's really happened that's causing them distress, that they do blow, that they blow internally, and are just super self-critical or engage in self-sabotaging and self-destructive behaviors because they're really just trying to numb out the pain any way they can, or they blow with the people around them. And so, if we had an engine that was about to blow, we'd want to fix it. And we'd take it to a mechanic right away. And I say the same thing about our psyche. If your psyche is in danger of blowing inward or outward, there's no shame, there's no harm, there's no blame in reaching out for some kind of mechanic. I'll just say a mechanic of the psyche.
No, yeah, that's such a good point. And I think ultimately, we just have to get to a place, and I agree with the first thing you said. We just have to keep talking about it. People like you and I, we from all different walks of life, from all different backgrounds. You know, I had a guest on a couple of weeks ago who was literally about to kill himself because he was left with this just horrible place of business. And you know, his dad left the business to him, and it was bankrupt, and all these things. It was horrible, and he didn't see a way out, and he was literally about to kill himself. And just someone recognized that he was in trouble, maybe possibly because that person had gone through something similar, and so they started making phone calls.
Mm.
And this guy got in front. His name is Matt. You know, Matt got in front of the people that could help him. And it's like, man, he's like, dude, like, I never would have imagined in that moment that there was a way out. And that's the problem, is we get so trapped, Phyllis, in our own minds.
Right. I remember somebody saying a long time ago, and I never forgot this expression. Um, don't go into your mind. Actually, I can't remember what it was, but it was something like, uh, don't go alone into your own mind. It's dangerous, to just go
Right.
alone into your own mind. I didn't say it well, but it really is that, because we only have a certain set of experiences and beliefs and understandings to call on. And so we tend to repeat what we know. And if what we know didn't work the first time, it's not going to work now. And we need new input from somebody who has a different lens on what's happening.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. That outside perspective, you know, like, and, you know, just from an entrepreneur standpoint, you know, I've had, you know, something come up and it's like, oh my God, you know, the world is burning, or my world is burning. And, you know, I went to a mentor of mine and I told him about it. And he's like, dude, that happens to me all the time. Like, it's not that big a deal. Like, get over it. Like, and it's like just the affirming, like, dude, that's pretty normal, man. Like, why are you worried about it? It is the calming voice, the reassurance, like you said, the affirming of it. Like, that was so key to get me back on the ground. And the different lens, all of a sudden, it's like, oh, yeah, you're right. This isn't that scary. I can handle this. Never mind, my bad. And I go about my day. So, I mean, now we're talking on a much grander scale when it comes to deep inside your own psyche. But, you know, it's the same thing when you get in front of that right therapist. And I emphasize the word right. You need to shop around.
Right.
Not one, not, it's not one size fits all. You know, you got to shop around and find that perfect one for you. But when you get in front of that right therapist and they shine the light where you can't see, all of a sudden, you know, it's like that lighthouse guiding the ship home. It's like, oh, wow. Okay, maybe I was focused on this dark place, but this dark place isn't actually scary. What's scary is this over here. I need to focus on this and we need to work on this. And I've had that happen so many times in therapy sessions where my therapist is like, Steven, like, you're focusing on the wrong thing, bruh. And it's like, am I? So, I mean, I love that you bring that up. Now, I want to dive into your book a little bit. Talk to us about the inspiration, first of all, that went behind why you wrote the book.
Yeah, I mean, the inspiration came out of my personal experience and out of years of working with, hundreds of people as a therapist. And basically, the way that psychotherapy has evolved, probably since the early Freudian days, is that we really look at people from a family systems perspective. And what that means is that we know that, even though each person is born with their own individual nature, someone may be more artistic or more mathematical or more extroverted or more introverted, just by their own nature. There's so much about us that really depends on our nurture. And by nurture, I mean the ways we're treated as we grow up by the people around us, and particularly by the people we depend on, the role models that we absorb of how relationships are supposed to be, how men treat women, how women treat men, how parents treat children, what the expectations are of us, how conflict is dealt with. All of these things are part of our nurture. And to the extent that a family is dysfunctional or abusive, there are very specific ways that people are affected by that we know now from the whole field of psychology. And people become symptomatic when they're mistreated, and they become, more loving and cooperative and kind, and they have better limits and boundaries, and they're better able to resolve conflict without violence if they're loved and cared for, and that's the environment that they're in, and that's what they learn. But people don't come to therapy for the good things that they learn, and there are many people who have learned wonderful things, and they're very contributing members of our society, and they make good partners and parents. But my experience as a therapist has shown me that abuse and neglect and dysfunction are very rampant in America today. And the level of what people have sustained in their homes and in their immediate communities is sometimes beyond imagination in terms of the violence or the discrimination or the neglect that they have suffered. And they become symptomatic, and their symptoms, and we understand this in the whole field of psychology, and I don't know that this is common knowledge, so this is one of the many things that I want to make common knowledge through my book. Their symptoms are actually a call for help. When someone is self-destructive, or they're highly aggressive toward other people, or they become so passive and easily dominated that they can't stand up for themselves or the people that they need to protect, or they become addicted, or they become, they're cutting, or they're doing some other self-harming behavior, it's a call for help. Just like if your appendix is, causing excruciating pain, it's calling you to get help for your body. And our worst psychological and behavioral and emotional symptoms are also a call for help, that something's wrong in in the environment of the people around us who are affecting us and influencing us. And so I took that, and it seemed like an obvious conclusion for me that, our family systems are not just our family of origin. There are larger communities. A school is a family system. A business is a family system. A large corporation is a family system. A state is a family system. And a government is a family system, or a country is a family system. In other words, those same dynamics of who's in charge and what they expect and what the rewards and consequences are for different behaviors, those dynamics play out in groups large and small. And to the extent that those dynamics on every level, from the individual family to a nation to really the globe, to the extent that those dynamics are not functional, to the extent that they hurt people, to the extent that they're discriminatory or withholding of resources or enact violence against certain people, they're operating on abuse family dynamics with the same effect on millions of people, thousands and millions of people, that one abusive person in a family can have on the people that they have influence and power and control over. And when I look at America, and I love America, let me just say, I love America. I love being an American citizen. I love this country. And I know that there are many, many millions of wonderful people here doing wonderful things, in all realms of human functioning. And we have some very big dysfunction going on in our country that is also hurting so many people. There are whole segments of our population that are being looked at as inferior or takers or entitled. There are people who, by the color of their skin, have no equal opportunity or equal access to justice. And I think we're familiar with some of the things that are happening in the country that are highly discriminatory and very, very abusive towards certain segments of our population. And it seemed to me that it was important to look through the lens of psychology at what's going on, because these issues are posed to us as partisan issues. One party believes this about immigration or about women or about whatever, and the other party believes that. But for me, that is actually not the essence of what's going on. And I think we're caught in a web of partisan politics that just further divides us and is inciting many people today to violence, because part of that dynamic is inciting violence. And what I say is that these are not partisan issues, these are psychological issues. And the reason why I say that goes back to what I said in the very beginning, is that people who are treated well, who have a sense of belonging, who are treated fairly, who who learn tolerance and good boundaries. Where do I end and you begin? Who learn peaceful conflict resolution skills and are not treated violently, even if they have an opposing opinion. Those people do not harm other people. They do not go out and commit murder. They do not discriminate. They do not hate people because of some way that they look or something that they've been told about them without even knowing them. And so, to me, what we're seeing in our country today is an escalation in mental, I call it mental unwellness, that we have so many people who are being enrolled in hating other people and feeling justified to act out on them. And we have so many people now in positions of power who advocate these things. And to me, this is a very, very serious mental health issue going on in our country that we could address if we understood our psychology and we understood some of the tools of psychology that help bring us back from this, what I call the ledge of our own extinction, because I think it possibly could be. Um, because we know how to help break the cycle of abuse and neglect in families, and those same principles can be applied to any group, large or small.
So, first of all, I want to say that, one of the most frustrating things in the world to me is that, I'll talk about anything. Like I said, I'm an open book. Like you want to know my political beliefs? We'll talk about it. I don't care. We all have our own beliefs, we all have our own opinions, and we're all entitled to do so. That's part of living in this country, this great country, is that we can think and believe whatever we want. I think the problem, or not the problem, but what frustrates me is that I I don't do it anymore because I'm so worried that I'm going to trigger everyone around me. So my question to you, Phyllis, is, you know, and I'm not trying to be argumentative here. I'm just there's a segment of the population that will say, well, people have become too soft because they take everything with massive offense. So is that has our culture changed from, the 80s when we could have difficult conversations and people wouldn't get offended? Or has our psychology changed to where all of a sudden everything is blown out of proportion? Or is it a catalyst, or is, the political media divide that obviously is happening in our country? I won't even try to address that because
Mhm.
it's so freaking huge. Like, is that the catalyst causing everyone to be hypersensitive to take a stand, whether it's left or right? Does that make sense?
I'm not quite sure what your question is. I think I hear you. Can you
so
summarize the question?
is what's been the cause? Like, what is the root of why? And I know you know what I'm talking about when it's like, I have to, you can't just go talk about these certain political issues in certain groups because or if they have an opposing view, it's going to become hostile. No one's going to listen to each other. It's going to become a screaming match. We can't have an intellectual, you know, common sense debate and try to hear each other's side.
Right.
Instead, we're going to take offense. Like you said, we're going to get hostile, whether it's physical violence, verbal aggressiveness. I don't approve of the word verbal violence, but verbal can be aggressive. I will use that. It could be one of those avenues, or it's just, people just try to shut you down. I'm a Christian, I'm an atheist, blah, I'm stupid, you're stupid, whatever. It's insanity to try to even have an intellectual debate with some people nowadays. And I'm not trying to say everyone. So my question is, what is the root? Where did this stem from? When did it start? What is causing it? And how in the world can we get past it?
Well, it's funny. I've been on so many different shows, and that's very often one of the questions. And I don't have an answer because I don't think there is one answer. I think there's so many contributing factors to where we've gotten. One of them being really skewed economics that have people feeling really unequal and at a loss and helpless and sometimes enraged. Um, but really, so that's just one piece, and we could probably add 10 or 20 or 100 pieces to that picture that are all contributing factors. But what I would say is, from the emotional lens, is that we are operating on a paradigm that no longer works. And it's escalated like so many things that we do. You get a little bit, you want more. You get a little bit more, you want more. And it's kind of human nature for whatever we think is, desirable, to want more of it. And the old paradigm that no longer works is the paradigm of I'm right and you're wrong. And it because it leads to the whole cycle of I'm going to dominate you with what I believe is right, and you're going to submit, and I'm not going to stop until you either agree with me, or you just submit to my will, or you do what I say, or you shut up, or I kill you, or whatever it is that I do. And we know, and this is why I keep coming back to the lens of like the individual and the individual family and what we've learned about psychology and human relations, is that that paradigm doesn't work in relationship. And I think, many of us know that in our own homes. If I'm just always right and my partner is always wrong, we're probably going to end up in a divorce because my partner thinks they're right and I'm wrong, in any given situation. So that whole paradigm of that I'm right and you're wrong, and I have a right to make you agree with me or submit to me, is what's killing us. And so I try to look at some of these really big paradigms that really need to shift, because without our awareness, they just escalate. So in the best therapy, we sit down, with people, and we help facilitate a conversation that's safe, that's respectful, where we learn to control our most aggressive impulses when we're either angry or hurt or scared or whatever trigger is that we're reacting to the other person with. We learn to restrain those impulses and really just be responsible for ourselves. How am I talking to you? Where am I coming from? Is there another point of view that I could actually open myself to without being destroyed because, I'm no longer like the right person, or you're not going to do what I say? Um, can I be responsible for my own behavior? The way I look at you, am I rolling my eyes? Am I screaming? Can I say I'm sorry if I really get that you do have a valid point of view and maybe I was off base, or maybe my opinion isn't the whole one that needs to be heard? Can I make amends? Can I reach for some kind of reconciliation with you because I want to reconnect with you? These are the thing, and reconnection, by the way, is what most people really want in their own lives. We want love and connection. The biggest thing that brings people to therapy and causes the most pain is some rupture in love and belonging. They're not getting along with their partner. They're estranged from their children. They feel mistreated by their boss. They can't get along with the people in their church, whatever it is. And they want that. They want to be loved and valued and belong and be respected and be supported and be safe. That's what I don't know anybody who doesn't want that in their own life. And yet, as a country, we don't even talk about that. We don't talk about love and belonging and reconciliation. It's still a battle of who's right and who's wrong and who's going to win. And so for me, that's one of the biggest paradigms that we really need to be aware of, and then shift to employing some of the most healing elements of the best psychology to break this cycle of domination and submission. And we know where it goes. It goes to war. It goes to killing millions of people. Um, but none of us want to be one of those people.
So it's interesting uh to hear. I have a lot of thoughts and emotions, I would say, with that last statement. But well, I digress. So when you talk about the paradigm, you know, I think that that's a very valid point, and I think some of the best advice I was ever given is never argue with anyone, because when you get into an argument, it becomes about winning.
Right.
And you know, when both parties are arguing to win, no one will win.
Exactly.
You both will lose. And so, like, to my point earlier, that's why I choose to avoid a lot of conversations, because it's just going to turn into an argument. I don't want to be in that. I'm more than welcome to hear your point of view. Like, I'm open to all kinds of points of view. Change my mind, but also be willing to hear mine. And I love what you said of people feeling like they have a right to make themselves heard, to beat someone over the head with their point of view. That is not a right. You have a right to say it, yes, and they have a right to turn around and walk away, right? Like or they have a right to share their point of view as well. And I think that is so huge. Is we it's almost like an entitlement nowadays. Like, we're entitled to make you listen to us. And I think that is such a flawed and dangerous mentality to have.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. And if you look at an individual family that operates on, I call it abuse or dysfunctional dynamics, that's what you have. You have somebody who has the power and they force other people to comply with whatever it is they want them to do or not do. And it harms people. And they're either going to become very passive because they really can't fight back, or they're going to rebel. And often the people who rebel, and this is human nature, this is not flaws in our character. Often the people who rebel are people who then identify with the aggressor and become like the aggressor. And then when those people get in other positions of power when they grow up, those are the dynamics that they're operating on. And that's why I call this a mental health issue, because inside the perpetrator is a victim. And most people don't know that.
Hmm. I have thoughts and emotions about that one too.
Well,
So,
well, hear them. I mean, that would be great.
I I don't know. I have to process. It's interesting because it's very important to me that I never identify as a victim. Um, I accept personal accountability for everything that's gone on in my life. Even if someone does do something wrong to me, there is something in that that I can hold myself personally accountable to. What Even if it's something as simple as how I emotionally react. I
Mhm.
have, you know, if someone tells me, says something to me or leaves a negative comment, for example, if I react in a negative emotional way, then I have allowed myself to become a victim in my point of view. And I do not want that. I have control over that. And as long as I maintain that control, I do not become a victim. I feel like a big problem in society, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Is my personal belief is a big problem in the society is we've created a victimhood mentality where it's almost the cool thing to be the oppressed, where it's almost the cool thing to be the victim. And I'm not saying that there aren't victims. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that it's gone too far. Um, you know, some guy driving on the interstate flipped me off. Oh no, it's ruined my day. I don't care. Like, ask me how many times a day I think about that. Zero. In the moment, it might tick me off, but I'm over it before I hit the next mile marker. It's It's those little things that trigger us to go to social media, to start these wars, to do all these things. And I feel like the victimhood mentality has gone way too far and is running way too rampant. I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I think it's a great topic, um, because I think what you're talking about for yourself is really, I would just use other words, but I totally respect and agree with what you're saying in the sense that you've done a lot of work and you have a choice inside of you now because of the work that you've done. And you forgive me if what I'm saying is incorrect, but this is what it
No,
sounds like. You've done a
I
lot
was
of
just going to ask what other word would you, instead of using the word victim? So you said you don't agree with that. What word should I use?
Well, no, let me just say it this way.
Okay.
You've done a lot of work, and so you now experience choice in how to be a responsible person for yourself, how to live in your integrity. You know you don't want to engage with the person who flipped you off, and you're not allowing yourself to be victimized by them because you have accessed your core inner, and I say it's called ego strength in psychological language, but it's not ego like conceit. It's your core strength, and you have access to that, and you want to be the kind of person who's responsible to manifest through that part of yourself in the world as much as possible. And that is one of the goals of the best psychotherapy, is to heal ourselves to the place where we do have access to that level of choice and personal responsibility. Personal responsibility is where it's at in the big picture. However, if a child is molested when they're 2, they're a victim of sexual abuse.
100%.
Right. If they're beaten, if they're, bullied on the playground because of the color of their skin for 5 years and there's no one rescues them and there's no relief, they're a victim. So I think we have to take the word victim out of a maligned place, because it's not that anyone is encouraging anyone to play being a victim and use that as their calling card. That's not mental health either. But I think there's a place for powerfully owning victimization as this is actually what happened to me. This happened to me when I was 4, and it happened to me until I was 7, and no one helped me, and no one believed me when I tried to tell. And it left these scars in my psyche that I've been trying to manage with somewhat dysfunctional behaviors. And now I'm seeking help. And it's okay to say I was victimized in that way. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. And like, and that's kind of, that's why I said, there are victims in the world. My wife is an example. She was sexually assaulted as a child. I have a good friend who was also sexually assaulted as a child. And to your point, no one believed her. She tried to tell people and no one believed her.
Mhm.
And, that's horrible. However, the difference is, the two people I'm referencing have consciously made a choice that victim status is not going to define them. They're going to rise above it. And they've done what you're talking about. They've done that work to get ahead of it.
Right,
But yeah, and kind of, I'm not trying to bully or bash or anything. It's just, you know, I hmm, I don't know what other way to describe how sensitive a lot of conversations feel when I feel like they shouldn't be so sensitive. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about. We have to talk about these things. We have to normalize talking about these things and understand it is okay, even though it's insanely personal. I get it. It hurts,
hmm
but when you find that right person to talk to, man, it changes the world when those words come out of your mouth. When
right,
those thoughts leave your brain and exit your mouth, like it's like, oh man, that's almost like a magic bullet in and of itself.
right. And what I would say, I mean, I think there's a lot to say about this whole subject of victim, um, because I think a lot of people feel shame about having been victimized, and so they don't want to admit it. And we have kind of a culture. This is my experience, sort of being a little bit older than you, is that, in the 80s, it appeared to me that sexual abuse, for instance, if we're talking about sexual abuse, really started to come into public awareness in a way that it had been sort of under covers before that and under wraps, and people didn't talk about it and didn't want to acknowledge it and didn't believe it and all of that. And then a lot of people really started to come forward and say they had been sexually abused. And um, and so they were kind of claiming their victimhood, if we can use that word, as, this actually happened, this is my truth, and I'm standing on it, and I'm going to say this person in my family, or this person, this teacher, or this priest, or whoever it was, molested me, and I'm declaring my truth. And that was a huge thing, because I noticed it in my practice that it really was coming to light and people were talking about it. And very quickly, the conversation changed from victimization to survivorhood. And you really just had to say you were a survivor. And of course, we want to be survivors of anything bad that happens to us, whether it's a physical disease or emotional assault or some kind of abuse or neglect. Of course, we want to survive that. We want to thrive in the wake of it. But there's a place to be able to say, this happened to me, and feel the pain of it and express the pain of it and own it to our culture, because it's real and is happening to so many people. Because I think that's part of becoming a survivor. And I don't think the bypass to just going from, something happened to me to I'm a survivor and I'm claiming that, um, is actually healthy or works. So there's just a place for the word victim, and it's a hard word, because a lot of people associate the word victim with, you're playing the sympathy card,
Mhm.
get up and get moving and get on, it's the past, get over it. um that kind of thing. You should, somehow there's shame attached to it, and I think it's okay to say, this happened to me and now I want to heal.
I agree 100%. And it's like the word hero to me. I hate the way we use the word hero. People hear my story and they're like, "Yeah, Steven, you're a hero." I'm like, no, I'm not. I survived. Um, to me, a hero is someone that pays a price beyond tolling. That's the hero. Um, just because I was doing my job, that does not make me a hero. And I think that goes hand in hand with what you're saying about the word victim. Like the way we're using is false, and I agree 100%. We attribute it too much to the wrong sorts of things. So I mean, I thank you for that point of view. The we're running out of time really quick. Actually, I can't believe it. Man, it's 47 minutes. I can't believe it. Before, the last thing I want to leave with, and this is a little bit controversial, I think. So if you don't want to answer it, that's perfectly fine. But generational trauma is starting to become a big thing, and I believe in generational trauma. Good grief, that's hard to say. I'm a Christian. Everyone, all my listeners know that. And the Bible talks about generational trauma. Um, the Quran talks about generational trauma. Like there are so many ancient texts that talk about generational trauma. It has to be true. Um, what are your thoughts on generational trauma and the effects that it's having on society today?
I'm just curious why you thought it was controversial. It doesn't
Um,
controversial
be,
to me.
because a lot of people deny the fact that, um, okay, I'm going to use this example because this is the only one I think of. Please do not crucify me for this. Um, you know, my you know uh, African American great great grandfather was a slave. Therefore, this person does not experience trauma from that three generations removed incident. And kind of like what you were saying, get over it by now.
Mhm.
While I think I agree, there's an aspect of get over it that needs to be played, there's also the truth of the matter that there is generational trauma that's passed down from family to family. So that's why I think it's controversial, is because it's, again, it's like the victim thing. It's being applied and played to your point earlier, partisan politics.
Well, I think there's no question that there's intergenerational trauma. And I think that, um, just if you just look at if you look at yourself, and I don't mean you because I don't know what your history is, but for most people, and even people that I've said, like, well, what happened to you early on? And they'll say, oh, nothing. This what I'm experiencing now has nothing to do with what I experienced as a child. And then they go on to tell me about their childhood, and it's an exact replica of what they experienced, and they didn't even know it. Um, and our parents are products of what happened to them. And to the extent that they don't have any conscious awareness or skills to change the things in their lives that were dysfunctional or not healthy, of course they pass them on. I myself have laughed at myself and said, oh my God, I'm channeling my mother, the way she talked to my father when I said that to my husband, you know? Um, so the more severe the trauma, and the more severe the consequences to let's just say a child. So let's just say you have a parent who was victimized as a child, was molested or beaten or ostracized or whatever, and they've gotten no help and no treatment, and they have children, and let's just say their main symptom is massive depression and some addiction issues. And so they go into their room and they drink and they don't come out for hours at a time, and their children feel very abandoned because they are. And then they have the effects of that trauma, so sometimes it's subtle, and it's just the things, sort of the messages parents give that they were given. And sometimes it's overt behaviors, but we can't help but pass on many of the things that we learned. And it's only through exposure, as you were talking about, to other people and other points of view and other role models of behavior and other experiences that we can expand our world and and heal some of those things so that we don't pass them on. And that's really one of the whole points of good psychotherapy is, whether you're suffering from PTSD from having been in combat, or you were sexually abused, or you were just left out on the playground, or whatever it was, you have the opportunity to heal the worst effects of that and live a fulfilling life that's more relational with other people so that you don't pass on the traumas that you sustained.
So, to all my listeners, I apologize. I did not warn Phyllis. We do not use PTSD. We
Oh,
take the
I'm
D
sorry.
off.
I'm sorry.
It's not a, it's not a disorder. It's a natural reaction to seeing horrible things.
A hundred,
Um,
a hundred.
I hate the disorder at the end of it. It's nothing wrong with you because you have post-traumatic stress. That is perfectly freaking normal. So I didn't think to tell you that. Um,
But I'm in a
but
100% agreement with you. A lot of things that we call disorders are not disorders.
mhm.
They're natural, normal responses to abnormal situations or stressful, traumatic situations.
100%. I appreciate your validation on that. You heard it from her, and she is a trained therapist, so it has to be true. Thank you. Take the D off. But no, I agree with you 100%, and I think I think the solution is to get well-trained therapists out into the world like yourself that can operate from a position of transparency and vulnerability like you do, to really help people. And I think that that's the key that helps so many people, is that you genuinely get them. It's not just stuff you read in a book. I love that. I go back to it. But anyway, so we're running out of time, Phyllis. Real quick, tell people how they can find you, how they can get a hold of you, maybe if they need some help or they need some recommendations for what to look for when looking for a good therapist or anything like that, and how they can get in touch with you and maybe even hire your services.
Yeah, I mean, I would be happy for anybody to get in touch with me. My website is www.phyllisleavitt.com. I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook, and I have articles on Substack, and I have lots of different talks on YouTube. And and I'll give you my business email. It's phyllis@phyllisleavitt.com, and you're welcome to email me directly. There's also a place on my website that's, says contact me. You just put in your email and I will contact you back. And I'm really happy to talk to anyone and make referrals or make suggestions or just hear your story, because I know I put out a lot in the world and sometimes I don't know what the feedback is. So I'm happy to hear from anyone. And
Absolutely. Oh, go ahead.
I just going to say, please check out my book, America in Therapy, A New Approach to Hope and Healing for a Nation in Crisis. And it's available from all the major booksellers.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, you guys know the deal. I'm going to have all her links in the show notes and in the description below. So make sure you scroll down, go pick up her book. It's rock solid. I only bring on guests that I truly am willing to put my name behind. And Phyllis is one of those people. She has Steven's stamp of approval. So again, Phyllis, thank you so much. Now, before we go, my guests always get the same question. How or I'm sorry, what does leading like a champion mean to you?
Leading like a champion? That's a good question. Give me a second. Um, I guess it would just be a reiteration of what we talked about, which is being yourself, being your honest, full, authentic self. We don't need somebody to try to be a role model. You know, who you are is what we need. I believe every person has an essential good, essential self that has a contribution to make. And the more we feel permission and accepted to be who we are, the more we can shine our greatest light in the world.
Absolutely, be yourself. That's all you got to be. You are enough. So I love it, Phyllis. Again, thank you so much for doing this for me. I genuinely appreciate it. For the rest of you, remember there is help out there. Do not become one of the 22 today, please. My email, you can find it. It's in the show notes. Email me. I will get on the phone with you day or night. I do not care. Do not become one of those 22. Phyllis, I know will welcome you with open arms. I'm not going to promise day or night for her. I won't speak for her on that. But if you email her and say, I need help, she will help you. And if she can't, she will help you get the person that you need. Right. I know she will because she's a good person and she has a good heart. Do not become one of the 22, my friends. It is not worth it. You are needed in this world. You are loved in this world. If no one else in this world loves you, I promise you I do. So, my brothers and sisters, do not, again, become one of the 22. That's going to wrap it up for this special episode on Memorial Day. To all my brothers and sisters that didn't make it home, you are not forgotten. To the family members, the Gold Star families left behind, we love you and we appreciate your sacrifice that we will never, ever be able to repay. From the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for the sacrifice you unwillingly made. So I will see you all next week, or actually Wednesday, same bad time, same bad channel. Y'all know the deal. In the meantime, never forget, lead like a champion. Goodbye, guys.